To support the Necromancer's bone attack skills in Diablo 2, you usually want to pair them with their control-oriented synergies, Bone Wall and Bone Prison. And which one is your favorite really depends on you as a player, since they both have fairly decent pros and cons, though they both can be used for the same goal, basically controlling monster positions so that you can deal damage safely. For the most part, the two skills will generally behave the same after being cast, with their base life scaling based on difficulty, with the points invested providing a helpful percent boost rather than a flat boost, making them stay relevant even at higher difficulties. In addition to that, they also have a scaling level and defense value as you go into those higher difficulties too, though at level 73 in Hell, they will still generally get hit most of the time. To help with the survivability though, the walls do have natural resistances, since they unfortunately do not benefit from the summon resist skill, but instead get boosted poison and cold resists in all three difficulties, with straight poison immunity in Nightmare and Hell, not to mention they also gain a 50% damage reduction in Hell difficulty itself, which greatly improves their survival in a lot of situations. Now, as far as how they behave in regards to enemies, they both act as exceptionally good monster magnets for attracting enemies from further away than you would normally expect, which can be a lot more useful whenever you get used to it, and on top of that, since they're not considered summons, they also do not take bonus damage from things like act bosses, instead taking damage more in line with what a player would. Though, by not being summons, they also fail to benefit from friendly auras, so you cannot use stuff like thorns on them, or even stuff like prayer, though enemy auras, such as Holy Shock, will damage them and enemy conviction will stick on them too, so it is a bit of a one-way deal. In terms of when they collapse, it's whenever their time limit runs out after 24 seconds or a segment is killed, the entire wall itself will just pop. So I usually prefer stacking multiple walls with staggered casting patterns, so I almost always have interlocking summons going. Now, as far as the wall's specialty, Bone Prison is the one most people will mention preferring because it has a decreased mana cost and it can eventually become free, and it will attempt to spawn a full circle around the targeted enemy. The downside is it needs an enemy to be cast on first of all, which means it's a little bit less useful for baiting, and it can be a little rough if your reflexes are not as fast as they used to be because you might get hit before you get it up. But it does make for a bit of a nicer tool whenever you're on controller, since it'll just kind of auto-aim for you. Personally though, I prefer Bone Wall, which may have a flat casting cost, but it gets slightly more durability than Prison thanks to its synergies, and it does not require a target to be cast, meaning you can block off a path with it and let it draw enemies up to it from off-screen, so you can bait and kill in batches. And with its increased length at higher levels, as well as creative aiming, you can even create mazes and tunnels and blockades to make using spear on clusters of enemies significantly easier to manage. With that said, both are actually great skills and really depend on personal preference as to which one you should use. And generally, I would say Prison would be easier to pick up for new players, but Wall has much more flexible utility. But do you have a personal favorite, or do you prefer your walls to have swords and anger like skeletons? Mention it down below, and as always, a special thanks to the channel members, patrons, and Twitch subs that make this content possible.